"Read to me, then, if you have come to read," said the Duke of Ravenmore, into the dark that was all he had now. "And when you find you cannot bear it, as the others could not, you may leave quietly and not trouble to say goodbye. They never do." Mrs. Alice Hale set down her bonnet and looked at the blind Duke sitting rigid in the shuttered gloom of his own library, for he kept the shutters closed now, there being no light he could see and no reason, in his reckoning, to let the sun into a room for the benefit of servants. And she did not flinch, and she did not pity him, and she did not, as the 6 readers before her had done within their first fortnight, decide the post was more than her nerves could bear. "I will read to you, Your Grace," she said, "and I will not leave quietly. If I go, I shall say goodbye like a Christian, and tell you why to your face, which I suspect no one has done for you in a long while. But I do not think I shall go. I have buried a husband and 2 other things I loved, and I have been poorer than you can imagine, and hungrier than you have ever been. And I have found, in the course of it, that there is very little left in this world with the power to frighten me. A blind duke in a dark room is not, I am sorry to tell you, among the terrors that remain. So you may stop trying to drive me off before I have taken my cloak off. It will not work, and it is a waste of both our time, and your library, Your Grace, is very dusty, which tells me you have driven off the housemaids too, and that is a separate problem we shall come to." There was a silence from the rigid figure in the chair. The Duke of Ravenmore had been blind for 2 years, since the fever that had taken his sight and left the rest of him intact, which he had come to consider the cruelest possible arrangement. A strong man of 40, imprisoned in the dark for what might be 30 years more. He had been, before, an active man, a hunting man, a man who read voraciously and rode hard and lived through his eyes. And the dark had taken all of it at once and left him, as he saw it, a useless thing, a great blind animal shut in a cage, dependent on servants for the meanest tasks, unable to so much as cross a room he had known his whole life without barking his shins and his pride together. And he had responded to this the way proud active men do respond to sudden helplessness, with a rage that had, over 2 years, hardened into a cold, bitter cruelty, driving off everyone who came near, because being pitied was more than he could bear, and being helped was a reminder of the helplessness, and it was easier, so much easier, to make them all leave than to let any of them see him grope. He had gone through 6 readers, 3 valets, and an uncounted number of housemaids. He had shut the shutters, and shut out his friends, and shut out his one sister, and shut himself into the dark within the dark, and he had told himself it was what he wanted, and he had never been so wretched in his life. "You are very free with your opinions," he said at last, "for a woman I am paying to read. You are not paying me to have no opinions, Your Grace. You could hire a parrot for that, and cheaper. You are paying me to read, which I shall do very well, and to be company, which I shall also do. And company that only agrees with you is not company at all. It is an echo, and echoes are poor comfort in a dark room, I should think. I have a great many opinions. You will have most of them, over time, whether you wish them or not. This one you may have now, free, since it is pressing. Open the shutters." "I am blind, madam," the Duke said, with cold contempt. "The light is nothing to me. Or had you not noticed?" "The light is nothing to you," Alice agreed, walking to the windows. "But it is a great deal to me, and to the servants who must clean this room, and to your sister, who I am told is not permitted to visit, and to the dog I hear whining in the passage, who would like, I imagine, to lie in a patch of sun. You are not the only person in this house, Your Grace, though you have arranged things for 2 years as though you were. The world did not go dark when your eyes did. It only went dark for you, and you have punished everyone else by making them sit in your dark with you, as though your loss were a debt the whole household must pay. It is not. So I am opening the shutters and letting the sun into this room, not for you, but for everyone else who lives here and has done nothing to deserve 2 years of gloom. And you may sit in it or not, as you please. You will not see it either way, but the rest of us will, and we have as much right to the sun as you have to your grief." And she threw open the shutters, one after another, and the long-shut library of Ravenmore filled with a flood of golden afternoon light for the first time in 2 years. And the Duke of Ravenmore, who could not see it, turned his blind face toward the warmth of it on his skin, and was silent, and Alice Hale watched something move across his hard, bitter face that she thought, though she could not be sure, was the memory of what light had felt like. And under it, buried very deep, the first faint stirring of a shame that was almost the beginning of hope. "Now," said Alice, sitting down and taking up the book that lay abandoned and dust-furred on the table, "we shall read. You have left off, I see, in the middle of the 3rd chapter, which is a foolish place to stop, and I shall begin a little before it, so we may find our way back into the story. Sit back, Your Grace, feel the sun, and listen. I have a good reading voice, they tell me, and it is the one thing about this arrangement I can promise you will not disappoint." And she began to read, in a warm, clear, steady voice, into the sunlit room. And the Duke of Ravenmore, who had driven off 6 readers, and shut out the whole world, and sworn he wanted nothing but to be left alone in his dark, sat back in the unfamiliar warmth of the sun he could not see, and listened, and did not drive her off, and felt, for the first time in 2 years, something in the frozen dark of him begin, very slightly, to thaw. She stayed. That was the whole of her method, and it was the same method the governess had used on the scarred duke in another county, because it is the only method that ever works on the wounded. She refused to be driven off, and she refused to pity, and she stayed in the room until the frightened creature understood it was safe. But Alice Hale did more than stay. She had a genius, born of her own hard life, for restoring to the Duke of Ravenmore the thing his blindness had stolen that mattered most. Not his sight, which no one could give back, but his sense of being useful, capable, a man rather than an invalid. She had watched him for a week, and she had understood that the rage and the cruelty came not from the darkness itself, but from the helplessness, from a strong man reduced to being led and fed and managed like a child. And she had set herself, quietly and stubbornly, to giving him back his competence, one small piece at a time. She began with the library. "You know this room," she told him. "You lived in it 40 years. You are barking your shins on furniture you could walk blindfolded a decade ago, because you have let them rearrange it and coddle you, and you have stopped trusting your own knowledge of your own house. So we are going to learn it again, not with your eyes, with the rest of you. Count the paces, feel the corners, trail your hand along the shelves. Your body remembers this room, even if your eyes cannot see it. Let it remember." And she walked him through it, patiently, day after day, until the Duke of Ravenmore could cross his own library unaided, and then his own hall, and then, a triumph that took a month and left him shaking with an emotion he would not name, walk out his own front door, and down his own steps into his own garden, alone, on his own feet, without a servant's hand, for the first time in 2 years. She did not stop there. She learned that he had been a great rider, and she conspired with the head groom to put him back on a horse, a steady old cob, on a leading rein at first, then off it, along paths Alice described to him as they went, the turns and the slopes and the low branches, until the Duke of Ravenmore rode his own land again, blind, feeling the sun and the wind and the horse beneath him, and came back from that first ride with tears standing in his sightless eyes, and a fierce, wild joy in his face that Alice had not seen there before, the joy of a caged thing that has remembered it can still run. That first ride was a thing Alice never forgot, because it was the moment she saw the whole man for the first time, unburied. He had refused it, of course, at first, had told her flatly that a blind man on a horse was a broken neck waiting to happen, that she was mad, that he would not be made a spectacle of, that he had given up such things, and she must let him give them up. And Alice had listened to all of it, and then said, "You are afraid. That is all this is. Not sense, fear. You love to ride more than almost anything, and you are afraid that if you try it, and cannot do it, you will have lost it twice, once to the blindness, and once to the failure, and that will be worse than never trying. I understand, but Your Grace, you have already lost it once by not trying. Every single day for 2 years. You cannot lose it more than you have already lost it by leaving it untried. And you might find you can still do it. The old cob is gentle as a lamb. The groom and I will be beside you every step. And if you cannot bear it, we will stop, and no one will ever speak of it. But you will not know unless you sit on the horse. Sit on the horse, Julian. What is the worst that can happen? That you discover you can still ride. Is that a thing to be so afraid of? And he had let them put him on the horse. They had led him at a walk, at first, along the level track by the river, Alice at his stirrup, describing the way, the willow coming up on the left, the slope down to the water, the old stone wall to the right, feeding him the landscape he could not see, so that he could build it in his mind and know where he was. And she had watched the fear go out of his shoulders by degrees, and something else come into them, the old horseman's ease, the body remembering what it had known for 40 years, the seat and the hands, and the balance that blindness could not touch, until, on the long level stretch, the Duke of Ravenmore had said, in a voice tight with a longing he could not hide, "Let me trot, just a little. Describe it ahead, and let me trot." And Alice had nodded to the groom to loose the rein, and told him the way was clear and level for 200 yards. And the Duke of Ravenmore had trotted his horse along his own riverbank, blind, for the first time in 2 years. And then, before Alice could stop him, before she even understood what was happening, he had asked for a canter, and gotten it. And the old cob had stretched into a smooth rocking canter along the level track, and the Duke of Ravenmore had ridden, blind and free and flying, the wind in his face and the horse beneath him, and the whole living world rushing past unseen, and he had thrown back his head and made a sound Alice had never heard from him, not a word, a shout, a wild wordless cry of pure joy, the cry of a man who had been buried alive for 2 years and had just, impossibly, been let out into the air. They pulled up at the end of the track, the Duke breathless and shaking, his sightless face wet, and Alice came to his stirrup and put her hand on his knee, and neither of them could speak for a moment. "I thought it was gone," the Duke said at last, unsteadily. "I thought that was one of the things I had lost forever. The wind, like that, the speed, being free. I had grieved it, along with everything else. And it was here the whole time, 2 years, waiting in the stable, and I was too afraid to try. And you put me on the horse. You gave it back to me. You gave me back the wind, Alice. Do you understand what that? No. You cannot understand. I do not have the words. I have not felt that free since before the fever. I did not think I would ever feel it again. And you simply put me on a horse and gave it back." "You gave it back to yourself," Alice said gently. "I only made you sit on the horse. The riding was yours. It was always yours. Blindness never took it. You only thought it had. That is the thing I keep trying to show you, Your Grace. You have lost far less than you believe. You have been sitting in a dark room for 2 years, mourning 100 things you had not actually lost at all, only stopped reaching for. The wind was always there. The horse was always there. Your own 2 feet, and your own hall, and your own land were always there. You lost your eyes. You did not lose the world. And I mean to spend as long as it takes handing you back, one at a time, all the things you only thought were gone. Because there are a great many of them, Julian. A great many more than you know, and it is the most satisfying work I have ever done, watching you discover them." And the Duke of Ravenmore, on his horse in the wind by his own river, reached down and found her hand on his knee and covered it with his own, and held it, and did not let go, and something passed between them in that moment that neither would name for months yet, but both, from that day, quietly knew. And with every competence she gave back to him, the rage drained a little further, and the cruelty softened, and the man beneath them, the man the darkness had buried, came a little further up into the light. For the Duke of Ravenmore had never truly been a cruel man. He had been a proud, active man made helpless, and the cruelty had been the thrashing of a strong creature caught in a trap. And once Alice began to free him from the trap, not by curing the blindness, but by teaching him to live inside it as a man and not an invalid, the thrashing quieted, and what emerged from underneath was, to his own great surprise, someone almost worth being. They talked, in the long hours of reading and walking and sitting in the newly sunlit library, the way people talk, who have both known real grief and therefore have no patience for small dishonesties. And the Duke learned Alice's story, which she told plainly, without self-pity, because self-pity was a luxury she had never been able to afford. She had married young, a good man, poor but kind. They had had 2 children, and then, in the space of 3 terrible years, she had lost all of it, the 2 children to a fever, one after the other, and then her husband, to the grief and the drink that took him after, so that Alice Hale had gone, in 3 years, from a wife and mother with a small happy household, to a childless widow alone in the world with nothing, and had survived it, and gone into service, and made her way, and arrived at last, hard and clear and unbreakable, and strangely at peace, at the dark library of a blind duke who thought his own loss the worst that any human being had ever suffered. "That is why you do not pity me," the Duke said slowly, understanding it at last. "Everyone pities me. It is the thing I cannot bear. The soft voices, the careful handling, the way they treat my blindness as though it were the end of the world. And you have never once pitied me. From the first hour, and I could not understand why. And now I do. You have buried 2 children and a husband. You have known a grief that makes mine look like I have been sitting in the dark for 2 years mourning my eyes, madam, and telling myself no one has ever suffered as I suffer. And across the room, the whole time has sat a woman who buried her children, and did not break, and does not pity herself, and came in here and threw open my shutters, and told me the world did not go dark when my eyes did. I am ashamed. I have wallowed. You have endured the unendurable, and you do not wallow, and it shames me to the bone. I do not tell you my griefs to shame you," Alice said gently, "and you must not make my losses a stick to beat yourself with. That helps no one, and it is only pride turned inside out. Grief is not a competition, Your Grace. Your blindness is a real loss, and a hard one, and you are entitled to mourn it, and I have never once told you otherwise. What I have told you, what I keep telling you, is only that your loss does not have to become everyone else's, and that a life is still a life, even in the dark, and that you are not, whatever you believe, a useless thing shut in a cage. You rode your own land yesterday. You crossed your own hall this morning. You are not the wreck you have spent 2 years insisting you are. I do not pity you because you do not need pity, Your Grace. You need what everyone who has been knocked down by life needs, which is not pity, but a hand up and a stubborn refusal to let you lie there. And that, I have discovered, I am rather good at giving, having needed it so badly myself and been given it so rarely. So no, I will not pity you. I will do the more useful thing, which is to keep hauling you up onto your feet until you can stand on them yourself, and then a little longer, until you believe you can." It was Alice, too, who gave him back his sister. For the Duke of Ravenmore had a younger sister, Lady Margaret, who loved him dearly, and whom he had shut out with all the rest, had refused her visits, returned her letters unopened, driven her away with the same cold cruelty he had turned on everyone, because she of all people had pitied him most, and her pity had been the hardest to bear, coming from someone he loved. And Lady Margaret had gone away wounded and bewildered, believing her brother had stopped loving her, when in truth, he had only been unable to bear being seen helpless by the sister who had once looked up to him. Alice learned this history over the weeks, in pieces, and understood it. And one day she simply wrote to Lady Margaret, without asking the Duke's leave, because she had learned that asking his leave to help him only gave him the chance to refuse, and told her the truth, that her brother had not stopped loving her, that he had shut her out from shame and not from coldness, that he was much recovered and much softened, and that if Lady Margaret would come, quietly, and be prepared not to pity him, there was every hope of a reconciliation, and Lady Margaret came. The Duke was furious at first, when he heard her voice in the hall. Alice had not warned him, knowing he would forbid it, and he turned on Alice with the old cold anger, and demanded to know how she dared, and Alice stood her ground and said, "I dared because she is your sister, and she loves you, and you have broken her heart for 2 years out of pride, and that is a wrong you would never forgive in another man. and I will not stand by and watch you do it. She is here. She has come a long way. She is in the hall, frightened, not knowing whether you will send her away again. You may go to her, or you may send her away and prove yourself exactly the coward I know you are not. But I will not apologize for bringing her, because it was right, and you know it was right, and your anger is only the fear of being seen by someone who remembers what you were. She remembers, Julian, and she loves you anyway. Go and let her." And the Duke of Ravenmore stood trembling for a long moment, and then he went, groping at first and then steadying, out to the hall, toward the sound of his sister's frightened breathing, and Lady Margaret gave a small cry at the sight of him, and he said, roughly, "Meg, I am sorry. God forgive me. I am sorry. I shut you out because I could not bear for you to see me, you who always thought me so. And it was pride, only pride, and it broke your heart, and it was unforgivable. And I have missed you every day of 2 years, and been too proud to say so. Forgive me. Come here. Let me. I cannot see you, Meg. You will have to come to me. Come here." And Lady Margaret flung herself into her blind brother's arms and wept, and he held her, and Alice watched from the doorway as another of the doors the Duke had bolted against the world came open, and thought that this, the mending of the wounded, the throwing open of the shutters they had closed against everyone who loved them, was the truest work there was, and the work she had been made for, and the work she had, without quite intending it, given her whole heart to at Ravenmore. Lady Margaret stayed a fortnight, and it was a joyous one, and when she left she took Alice aside and pressed her hands and said, with tears in her eyes, "You have given me back my brother. He was gone, truly gone, shut away where none of us could reach him, and you walked into that dark house and opened the shutters and hauled him back into the light, and he is himself again, more himself than he has been since the fever, more himself in some ways than before it. I do not know what you are to him, or what you may become, but I know what you have done, and I will bless you for it as long as I live. Whatever you are to him now, I hope, for both your sakes, you will let yourself become more. He looks toward your voice, Mrs. Hale, the way a plant turns to the sun. I do not think he knows he does it, but I saw it. A sister sees. Do not go, whatever happens. He cannot afford to lose the one who let the light in." And Alice had murmured something suitable, and looked away, because Lady Margaret had seen the thing Alice had not yet let herself look at directly, that she had come to Ravenmore to read to a blind man, and had, somewhere in the opening of all those shutters, fallen entirely in love. And the Duke of Ravenmore, sitting in the sunlit library he had shut against the world, listening to the warm, steady voice of the widow who had suffered more than he, and pitied herself not at all, understood that he had fallen in love with her strength, her clarity, her fierce, unsentimental kindness, the way she had walked into his dark and refused to be afraid of it, and understood, in the same moment, with a cold, plummeting certainty, exactly why he could never tell her so. His reason was pride, and it wore the mask of honor, as pride so often does. For the Duke of Ravenmore had decided, in the cold logic of a proud man, that a blind man had no right to ask a woman to marry him. To offer Alice his hand, he reasoned, would be to ask her to chain herself for life to an invalid, to bind a strong, capable woman, who had already suffered more than her share, to the endless labor of leading a blind man about, reading to him, being his eyes, his nurse, his keeper, until one of them died. It would be, he told himself, the act of a selfish man exploiting his own helplessness, trading on her kindness, on the very compassion that had brought her into his dark, to secure himself a lifelong caretaker under the name of a wife. And worse, if she accepted him, he would never know whether she had done it from love or from pity, whether she wanted him or only could not bear to leave a helpless man alone. And a marriage in which he could never be sure she had not simply been too kind to refuse the blind Duke was a marriage he would rather die than enter. So he resolved to say nothing, ever, and to keep her, if he could, as a reader and a companion, and nothing more, and to bury the love as he had buried so much else in the 2 dark years, and to be grateful for what he could have, and ask for nothing he could not. And having resolved it, he did the thing such men do, Having decided he must not love her, and being unable to stop, he began, clumsily, to push her away, to go cold again, to retreat into the old bitterness, to manufacture distance, because the nearness had become unbearable now that he had named what he felt, and forbidden himself to act on it. He became, over a fortnight, difficult again, short with her, withdrawn, and Alice, who had come to read him better than anyone alive, watched the man she had spent months coaxing into the light begin, for no reason she could see, to retreat back into the dark, and did not understand it, and was hurt by it, and finally, being Alice, confronted it head-on. "You are pushing me away," she said, one evening, setting down the book. "For a fortnight now, we had come so far. You were nearly happy, I think, or on the road to it, and then something changed, and you have gone cold, and difficult, and distant, and you are trying, I think, to make me want to leave, exactly as you drove off the 6 readers before me. And I will not have it, Your Grace, without at least knowing why. I have earned that much. Tell me what I have done, or what has changed, or what has frightened you back into the dark, because something has. I know you too well now to believe otherwise, and I would rather hear the hard truth than sit here being pushed away by inches and left to guess at the reason. What is it? What has happened?" And the Duke of Ravenmore, cornered by her directness, and being, for all his pride, fundamentally an honest man, found that he could not lie to her. "What has happened," he said, low, "is that I have fallen in love with you, madam, and it is the most inconvenient and impossible thing that has ever happened to me, and I have been trying to push you away because I cannot have it and cannot bear to be near it. There, you wanted the hard truth. That is the hard truth, and I am sorry for it, and now you know why I have gone cold, and you may make whatever arrangements you think best." Alice sat very still. "You have fallen in love with me," she repeated, "and so you are pushing me away. You must forgive me, Your Grace, but that is the reasoning of a madman. Most men who fall in love draw the woman nearer. You have decided to fall in love and use it as grounds for eviction. Explain it to me, because I do not understand, and I find my heart is beating rather hard, and I should like to understand before I let it beat any harder." "Because I am blind," the Duke said, and there was anguish in it now. "Because I will not do it, Alice. I will not take a strong, capable, good woman, a woman who has already suffered more than her share, who has buried her children, who has earned some peace at last, and chain her for life to an invalid. To marry me is to become my keeper, my eyes, my nurse, to spend the rest of your years leading a blind man about and reading to him and never being free. It would be the act of the most selfish man alive, to use your kindness, the very kindness that brought you into my dark, to trap you into a lifetime of caretaking under the name of a wife. And worse than that, even if you said yes, I would never know why, whether you loved me, or whether you only pitied me, or could not bear to leave a helpless man alone. I would lie beside you for 30 years, never certain you had not simply been too kind to refuse the poor blind Duke. And I would rather have you as a companion I may not touch, and know it is freely given, than have you as a wife, and never be sure you were not merely too good to say no. So I said nothing, and then I could not bear the nearness of saying nothing, and I began to push you away, because it was the only way I could think of to survive wanting you. That is the whole of it. It is not that I do not love you, it is that I love you too well to chain you to my darkness." And Alice Hale, widow, who had buried her whole first life and built a second out of nothing, who had walked into a blind man's dark and thrown open the shutters, looked at the Duke of Ravenmore with his anguished, sightless eyes and his impossible honorable pride, and did the thing she did best, which was to tell him the plain truth without an ounce of pity in it. "Now you listen to me," she said, "because you have got it all wrong, every piece of it, and I am going to set it right, and you are going to sit still and hear me. First, you say to marry, you would be to become your keeper, your nurse, your eyes, chained to an invalid. But Your Grace, you are not an invalid. You rode your own land last week. You cross your own hall unaided. You are the least invalid blind man in England, and I made you so, on purpose, precisely so that no one, least of all you, could ever call you helpless again. I did not spend these months teaching you to stand on your own feet, so that you could then offer me marriage as though you were a burden. You are not a burden. You are a capable man who cannot see, which is a different thing entirely. And if you ever again describe yourself to me as an invalid to be nursed, I shall be very cross, because it insults my work. Second, you say you would never know whether I married you from love or from pity, and I will settle that now, plainly, so you need never wonder. I do not pity you. I have never pitied you. You know that. It is the first thing you noticed about me, and the reason you did not drive me off. A woman who buried 2 children does not have pity to spare for a healthy man of 40, who has lost his sight but kept everything else, and I have told you so to your face more than once. So you may strike pity from your reckoning entirely. It has never been in it. What is in it? What has been in it for months, though I have been every bit as much a coward about saying it as you, is love. I love you, Julian. Not pity. Love. The plain, clear, unsentimental love of a woman who has known the worst the world can do, and does not give her heart lightly, or waste it on the helpless. I did not fall in love with a blind man who needed me. I fell in love with a strong, difficult, honest man, who fought his way back into the light, and made me laugh in a house that had forgotten how, and who happens to be blind, which I find I do not care about in the slightest, because I am not marrying your eyes, I am marrying you. And third, and last, you say you would rather have me as a companion freely given than a wife you could not be sure of. Well, you may stop arranging my life for me, Your Grace, exactly as you stopped letting me arrange yours. I am a grown woman who has survived more than you can imagine, and I am entirely capable of knowing my own heart and choosing my own life, and I will not have you nobly refusing to propose to me for my own good, as though I were a child who must be protected from her own choices. I have made my choice. I choose you. Now you may either propose to me like an honest man, or I shall propose to you, and I warn you, I will not do it gently, because I have been made to wait a fortnight, while you pushed me away for love, and I find I am rather out of patience. Which is it to be? And the Duke of Ravenmore, sitting in the sunlit library with the whole of his careful, honorable pride, dismantled piece by a widow who would not let him martyr himself, began helplessly to laugh, the first true laugh Alice had drawn from him, cracking clean across 2 years of frozen dark, and then to weep, both at once, and he reached out his hand into the dark, unerringly, toward the sound of her voice, and she met it with her own. "Marry me, then," he said, "since you will not let me be nobly wretched about it. Marry me, Alice Hale, and be not my keeper, not my nurse, not my eyes, but my wife, my equal, the woman who threw open my shutters, and hauled me up out of the dark, and would not let me lie there. I love you. I have no eyes to see you with, and I have thought, these 2 years, that I would never again find anything in the dark worth having. And then you walked in, and let the sun into the room, and I have discovered that there are a great many things a blind man can see perfectly well. Your kindness, your courage, your voice, the warmth of you, the whole of your good, fierce heart. I do not need eyes to see you, Alice. I see you better than I ever saw anyone when I had them. Marry me, and let me spend the rest of my life seeing you, in the only ways that ever mattered." "Yes," said Alice Hale, and she was laughing and weeping too now, her hand locked in his. "Yes, you difficult, honorable, impossible man. Yes, on one condition, that you never again call yourself a burden, or an invalid, or a thing to be pitied, because I have married a man, not an affliction, and I will hear no more of it. Agreed?" "Agreed," said the Duke of Ravenmore, and drew his widow into his arms in the sunlit library, and the 2 years of frozen dark fell away and did not come back. They were married that summer, in the little church at Ravenmore, and the Duke walked to his own wedding, unaided, on his own feet, down a path he had learned pace by pace with Alice at his side, and stood at the altar, and spoke his vows in a clear, steady voice, toward the sound of her breathing, and put the ring on her finger without fumbling, having practiced. And the whole county wept to see the blind Duke who had shut himself in the dark for 2 years, married in the summer sun, to the widow who had opened his shutters. and the marriage remade him entirely, as such marriages do. The Duke of Ravenmore, who had believed his life ended when his sight did, discovered under Alice's fierce loving management that it had merely changed, and that a great deal of living remained to a blind man with the will to do it. He rode. He walked his land. He learned to know his tenants by their voices and their footsteps, and became, blind, a better and more attentive master than he had ever been sighted, because a man who must listen learns to hear the things the seeing miss. Alice read to him every evening of their lives. The whole of literature poured into the dark for him in her warm, steady voice, so that he joked he had read more books blind than ever he had with eyes. And the great house of Ravenmore, which had been a shuttered tomb, became the sunniest and most open house in the county, for Alice would have every shutter thrown wide and every room full of light, not for the Duke, who could not see it, but for everyone else, and for the plain principle she had walked in on the first day and never abandoned, that the world does not go dark when one man's eyes do, and that grief, however deep, does not entitle anyone to shut out the sun for everyone else. She was, in the fullness of time, the making of more than her husband. The Duchess of Ravenmore became known throughout the county for one cause above all others, the care of the afflicted who had shut themselves away, the blind, the maimed, the broken, the grief-frozen, all the wounded who had, like her husband, responded to their wounds by walling out the world. She had a genius for them, having married one and hauled him back into the light, and she could not pass such a soul without stopping and throwing open their shutters, literally or otherwise, and refusing to pity them, and hauling them up onto their feet. There was no shuttered, wounded creature within her considerable reach that the Duchess of Ravenmore did not seek out and drag, stubbornly and lovingly, back toward the sun. Late in their long life together, a young kinswoman, newly and terribly widowed, and inclined, in her grief, to shut herself away from the world, came to the old Duchess for comfort, and found, instead of soft condolences, something bracing and better. "You want to shut the shutters," the Duchess of Ravenmore said, taking the young widow's hands. "I know. I have buried a husband and 2 children, so do not imagine I speak from ignorance. I know exactly how the dark calls to you, how it seems the only fit response to a loss like yours, how you feel you have earned the right to shut out a world that could let such a thing happen. And I will tell you what I learned, the hard way, and what I taught the blind man I married, who had shut every shutter in this house against a world he could no longer see. Grief is real, and you must feel it, and I will never tell you otherwise. But your grief does not entitle you to the dark, my dear. The world did not go dark when your husband died. It only went dark for you, and if you shut the shutters, you do not punish the world that wronged you. You only punish everyone who still loves you, and must sit in your dark with you. So do not shut them. Throw them open instead, even when you cannot feel the sun, even when it seems an insult to your grief to let the light in. Throw them open, for the people who still love you, and for the person you will be on the far side of this, who will want the light back and will thank you for not having boarded it out. I married a man in a shuttered room who thought his life was over. I opened his shutters and hauled him up, and we had 30 years of sunlight he had been ready to throw away. There is a life on the far side of the dark, my darling. I promise you there is. I have lived it twice. Do not shut the shutters. Let me help you throw them open. It is the only thing I know that works. And it works. And I have the 30 years to prove it." And across the sunlit room, the Duke of Ravenmore, blind still, and happy still, and turned, as he always turned, toward the sound of his wife's voice, smiled, and said, "Listen to her. She is always right, and she will not rest until your shutters are open, and you may as well surrender now and save yourself the fortnight of resistance I wasted. She let the sun into a dead man's tomb and made it a home. There is no shutter she cannot open. I am the proof. I have not seen the sun in 30 years, and I have lived in nothing but light since the day she walked in." And the Duchess of Ravenmore reached across and took her husband's hand, the way she had that first day in the dark, and neither of them, to the end of their long, bright lives, ever shut the shutters again.